Interstate 94 is an east-west highway connecting the Great Lakes and northern Great Plains regions of the United States. It's the only east-west interstate with a direct connection to Canada, crossing over the Blue Water Bridge into Sarnia, Ontario. I-94 is especially busy between Chicago, Illinois and Detroit, Michigan. When the interstate was built through Michigan's Jackson and Calhoun counties in the late 1950s, engineers encountered a significant challenge in the form of a railroad line just east of Albion, New York Central System's Springport branch. The lightly used rail line extended just over 10 miles between Albion and Springport, but would impede traffic on I-94 unless an overpass was constructed. Train traffic didn't justify the cost of building a bridge, so what resulted was one of about 6 at-grade railroad crossings in the state of Michigan on 4-lane divided highways. At the end of the westbound entrance ramp at the intersection of I-94 and M-99, railroad crossing signals guarded the New York Central Springport branch for about a decade. Until recently, this was the only known photo of the crossing. To learn more about this unique railroad crossing, we spoke with local historian Frank Pasick at the Springport Railroad Depot.
The Lakeshore Michigan Southern Railroad came to Springport in 1872. The depot is still standing today. There's some beautiful architecture that's typical of lakeshore depots that were built in the 1870s. We're fortunate that this is still standing here today. It was built from Hillsdale all the way to Lansing, and it was operated for many years. And of course the Lakeshore Michigan Southern Railroad was acquired by the New York Central System. In 1940 the railroad was abandoned from Springport to Lansing, and so this became a spur, and railroad cars would come up from Albion to service the mill here, and which is right next to the railroad depot. We were approaching wartime, and they were using scrap metal to make war implements. And the upcoming war signaled some things for railroads and transportation. A lot of the factories were using the line from Jackson to Lansing rather than from Albion to Lansing. So that had something to do with it also.
New York Central continued to serve the grain elevator at Springport, which depended on reliable and affordable rail service. They were not about to give in to the state of Michigan, which wanted them to build an overpass.
There were very few grade level crossings on interstate highways. Usually they would build a bridge, but they didn't build a bridge because M99 was just down the road, and they had to go up a hill and down a hill. It was too short a distance to have room to build a bridge, and so this is why they didn't build a bridge. They made a grade crossing. There are other grade crossings in Michigan, and most of them have been all eliminated now.
As mentioned, until recently this was the only known photo of the Springport branch grade crossing. We reached out to the Michigan Department of Transportation to see if they might have any other photos of I-94 at or near milepost 124. Sure enough, they were able to provide us with this brilliant aerial photo from the late 1950s, just prior to the interstate's opening for traffic. If you look closely at this southwest view of the intersection, you can see where the branch line extended out of Albion for Springport on a gentle, sweeping curve.
Well, it used to be the US 12 went through Albion, and that's what they called Michigan Avenue now. But because of the increased traffic in the modern age, they needed to replace it. So they built the superhighway. They started from the left, they started to the right, and Albion was in the middle where they were going to meet. So during the late 50s, the State Highway Department acquired land, but that railroad went to Springport from here. And what to do with the railroad? The MDOT wanted them to build a trestle, and the railroad didn't want to, or they wanted them to abandon the line, and that wasn't good because they had business in Springport for the Springport elevator. Also in Devereux there was some business, and so they built the highway with a regular grade crossing with the railroad bells. They were hand signals that were put on manually by a switch on each side. And so the train would come up to it, the conductor or the person there would turn it on and cross the highway and then turn it off. So on the plaque on the bridge over on M99 over I-94, the New York Central Railroad is mentioned as cooperating with the project. And the bridge was built in 1959. Finally, it happened that the railroad gave in and abandoned the line from Springport to Albion in 1968. The tracks were torn up. The crossing was eliminated, and they put concrete and raised the grade level to match the rest of the highway.
In 2022, there is virtually no trace of the Springport branch grade crossing on I-94. The highway has since been rebuilt several times, and farmers have done their best to remove the grade through their adjacent fields. The only way to see evidence of the railroad is from above. The tree line to the south of I-94 still follows the old right-of-way, but you'll only notice it from Google Maps. I-94's other at-grade rail crossing in Michigan was east of Ann Arbor near the junction of US 23. It's a little easier to spot since a nearby power line follows the grade over the highway, but unless you're really paying attention, you'd likely never realize a railroad once crossed there. Known as New York Central's Ypsilanti branch, it continued north and also crossed US 23. The line was originally built by the Detroit, Hillsdale, and Southwestern and eventually became the Ypsilanti branch of the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern. When the New York Central and Hudson River Railroad gained a majority stake in the Lakeshore in 1877, the line was downgraded as a secondary route. Although it was a lesser rail line, it proved to be valuable whenever New York Central needed to reroute trains via Hillsdale. It also had a healthy rural customer base and served a large cement plant at the appropriately named Cement City. In the mid-1950s, when I-94 was constructed, New York Central fought the state of Michigan just as it did in Albion, demanding that it shouldn't be forced to build overpasses for a line that had only one train per week. The railroad came out on top, forcing the state to build an at-grade crossing not only at I-94, but also on US 23. At US 23, the Ypsi branch crossed the four-lane highway at a pull-off between the north and southbound lanes. Today, the pull-off remains and is used in special circumstances by police, emergency, and maintenance vehicles. If you look closely at this aerial photo and Google Maps Street View images, you can actually see where the surface of the road is breaking up around where they paved over the grade crossing. The rails are likely still in place since corroding steel can cause cracks in the pavement. So the next time you're north of the I-94 and US 23 junction, look out for this pull-off to see where the railroad once crossed the highway. Retired railroader Ron Stokes told us that one time he and his fellow crewmen were training a conductor who desperately needed a bathroom break. Northbound out of Saline, the train traveled through deeply wooded areas, so the veteran railroaders told the trainee to simply relieve himself off the back deck of the GP9, knowing full and well what was about to happen. As the naive trainee was taking care of business, the locomotive emerged from the woods and crossed over I-94 without warning. The crew had put him on front and center stage, with dozens of stopped motorists getting a view they never wanted to experience. Needless to say, the conductor never used the bathroom from the back of a moving locomotive ever again. Only a tiny section of the Ypsi branch remains today and is operated by Watco's Ann Arbor Railroad from Pittsfield Junction to Saline. The section that crossed the highways between Ypsi and Pittsfield Junction was removed in 1969. Today, only one at-grade highway railroad crossing remains in Michigan and is located on the Great Lakes Central's Middleton branch on US 127 between Ithaca and St. John's. The line was built in 1888 by Toledo-Saginaw and Muskegon Railway and eventually became part of the Grand Trunk and Western's Greenville subdivision. North of St. John's, US 127 follows an expressway or limited access segment with intersecting roads, driveways, and cross traffic. Until recently, the speed limit was 55 miles per hour, but has since been upgraded to 65 miles per hour. This grade crossing is the best example of what the Albion and Ypsilanti highway crossings would have looked like 65 years ago. Our good friend Peter Hayes of Peter and Ben Productions provided this rare footage of a Great Lakes Central train running west over 127 with a long train of covered hopper cars in tow. We hope you enjoyed our coverage of Michigan's unique interstate railroad crossings, and thank you for watching Delay and Block Productions. Until next time, happy railroading.